All right. This is actually from the Joint House Inquiry. Michael Castle is actually interviewing two FBI agents out of Minneapolis who are hidden behind a partition. And Ken Williams of the Phoenix FBI, he's also hidden behind a partition. The two Minneapolis agents are to be known as Dave Frasco, who's the head of the Radical Fundamentalist Unit, and Mike Maltby, the supervisor agent of Minneapolis. So let's hear what they have to say.
Senator Castle, Representative Castle, Governor Castle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for all the titles. Before I start, let me just say to the Phoenix agent that I listened to your testimony concerning the issues of personal security, et cetera, and we all obviously sympathize with that, and Congress obviously has to do its job responsibly. Let me turn to the Moussaoui issues first, if I may, and my opening question will be for the Minneapolis agent and the headquarters supervisor. And the question is simple, but we think important. What priority did this matter receive in each of your respective offices? If we could start with the Minneapolis agent first.
On August 15th, once we received the information about Mr. Moussaoui, we initiated the intelligence case. And we worked extremely hard. This was the #1 priority on the squad that I was assigned to until and through September 11th, 2001. This was our full court press. We had some other collateral cases, of course, and we didn't neglect those. However, this was the brightest burning case.
Thank you. Headquarters supervisor.
From a headquarters perspective, the second that we were made aware of this within the unit that did in fact handle that matter, it became a priority. It was a priority of the unit. Clearly we saw this as being of great importance. We saw that his activities were very suspicious, and we also made it a priority.
Well, there's going to be some argument about that because in the case of Zacarias Moussaoui of Minneapolis was that, according to the arresting agent, Harry Samet, that the supervisors, meaning Maltby and Frasca and people at the Radical Fundamentalist Unit, they basically didn't take this as serious as they should have because the FISA warrant, which is a foreign intelligence surveillance warrant to search a belonging of a foreign national. Now, Zacarias Moussaoui is a foreign national. He's not a U.S. American. And so there's a different warrant to search his laptop, for example, because he was arrested at the, I want to say the Radisson Hotel. No, it was some hotel. Forgive me, I don't know the name of the hotel, I forgot. And he was with another person named Hussein Al-Attas. Hussein Al-Attas on his possession had a martyrdom will and basically told the FBI agents that were questioning him while Samet was questioning Moussaoui that Moussaoui was ranting about killing Americans and whatnot. So they detained them. They didn't arrest them for anything, but they detained them. And they found out through intelligence from the French authorities who faxed information regarding Moussaoui as being involved with a person by the name of Khaled al-Masri, I think that was his name. He had a hook both on his hand, and he was involved with an organization that is noted for terrorism. And so that right there was more than enough for this to be warranted for approval for a FISA warrant to search his belongings. But then, you know, there was this big discussion about the warrant itself was not a criminal warrant, but a investigation application for a warrant. There was this big argument between Samet and Dave Frasca, and it was a mess. And they didn't get the FISA warrant in time. And after 9/11, then they looked at his laptop. A little bit too late there, right?
For the Minneapolis agent, you told our staff that on August 25th.
And by the way, later on, Colleen Raleigh, who was a legal lawyer, a legal attaché for the FBI in Minneapolis, national security analyst, she basically came out, wrote a huge scathing letter about the supervisors at the Radical Fundamentalist Unit to Director Mueller. And I think she wrote 1 or 2 letters to him. And she testified too under oath at a committee hearing regarding this incident.
First, you talked with another agent in Minneapolis who said if you didn't make any progress with the agent who was handling the case at headquarters, you should consider going to the section chief or assistant section
Right.
chief at headquarters. Why didn't you do that?
I contacted my immediate supervisor, who was an assistant special agent in charge, acting as a special agent in charge of the Minneapolis office. I advised him of the players in the chain up to and including the Deputy Assistant Director for Counterterrorism. And once I encountered problems at the first line level at FBI headquarters, I went to my ASAC again and requested that he start moving things up the chain. It was appropriate for him to handle matters at his level in the organization, much more appropriate than it was for me to move those things forward. So I took those concerns to my immediate supervisor, requested that he take the information further. And as to why it wasn't taken any further, I'm sorry, sir, I don't know.
Thank you. Our staff has been told, continuing with you, that there have been several prior incidents in which Minneapolis found itself at odds with the FBI headquarters on FISA issues. Can you describe them?
No, sir, I cannot. I was installed as the acting supervisor of this squad in July of 2001, and I only had some very, very brief anecdotal information from cases prior to this. Nothing in specific, and quite frankly, I didn't focus on the past problems that we had had. I was much more inclined to focus on the problem that was facing us.
Does the FBI headquarters agent have any helpful information with respect to that question?
As I stated in my testimony, sir, I had arrived at headquarters about 3 months prior to September 11. I am not aware of specific issues. I think in a post 9/11, 2001 environment, I did become somewhat aware of those, but to be able to testify to those facts would be very difficult, other than
And just to be clear, your answers are you don't know the information, so you cannot give it to us, rather than you are not willing to give it to us.
That's correct. I just don't have that detail.
Okay. To both of you, do you think that prior disciplinary actions involving agents making erroneous applications to the FISA court made agents reluctant to file FISA applications? We can start with the Minneapolis agent, perhaps.
Good question.
Yes, sir, I do believe that. In one of the telephone conversations I had with a supervisory agent at the Radical Fundamentalist Unit, those points were made to me about the history with the FISA court. And the position of that supervisor was that he wanted to ensure that at the time we presented everything to the FISA court, every I was dotted, every T was crossed, that we were absolutely certain the information we were presenting was accurate. My position and my response was that this case was fast-breaking. Information was coming in on a daily basis, sometimes several times a day, and that it was my position that we should present the information we had to the FISA court on an emergent basis as quickly as possible, with the caveat that this is a breaking investigation. Information will be relayed to the FISA court as it becomes available if it changes materially the information that's presented to the FISA court. My inclination was to push this forward as quickly as we could. I do believe there was a chilling effect.
And the headquarters agent?
I don't believe so. The supervisor that handled that particular FISA request was a very experienced supervisor. He had brought dozens of FISAs before the court in the past. Yes, he was aware of some of the past problems with regard to FISA court and some of the issues that had developed there. But significantly, and I think this needs to be made very clear, is that in April 2001, new procedures had been put in place within FBI headquarters. They're now known as the Woods procedures. Those Woods procedures require that the field verify facts within a FISA application before the agent goes and takes those matters before the court and swears as the affiant to the FISA request. I think that that has greatly helped the sense of these agents going in with fact as opposed to possibly getting tripped up.
Thank you. For the Minneapolis agent, in your interview with the Joint Inquiry staff, you criticized the radical fundamentalist unit for removing information that connected the Chechen rebels to Osama bin Laden. What was your basis for that criticism?
The information as it was presented back to me.
Right, I have to make a retraction. That's not Mike Mulpey. That is Harry Samet, the arresting agent of Moussaoui. I got the names mixed up. And Dave Frask is the head of the radical fundamentalist unit. That's the unit chief that you see on the name. Mike Mulpey is actually the supervisor of Harry Samet. So just want to make a retraction.
By the radical fundamentalist unit was that specific paragraph, which was included in our application for the FISA, or our letterhead memorandum that requested the FISA, referenced what we believe to be the connection that we needed to establish between Mr. Moussaoui and a foreign power. And if specifically the FISA law required that we show Mr. Moussaoui was connected to a foreign power,
Right.
that would be relevant information. That would be information that is required by the statute to prove the allegations.
Right, that's what I mentioned before. Now they got this information, and it, like, Samet's not lying here. They got that information from French authorities. And Colleen Rowley, actually, when she testified, she said that in the letter to Mueller that this was more than enough to get the FISA warrant. And she was right, and so is Harry Samet. So yeah, the radical fundamentalist unit blew this one.
To obtain the warrant. And it was my position at the time, and it remains so today, that had that information not been made available to the National Security Law Unit, the lawyers who were to review the FISA, it never would have proceeded beyond their unit. It is statutorily required. If you fail to meet the statutory burden, then of course it's not going to go any further. And in my frame of reference, believing that there was a chilling effect because of the prior incidents with the FISA court, I believed at the time that there was a possibility the case was being undersold and that this was redacted, this information was redacted because there was this chilling effect.
For the headquarters supervisor, on August 18th of 2001, the Minneapolis field office sent a 26-page memo to headquarters describing the Moussaoui investigation. What was your reaction to the memo?
I did read the memo. Obviously, it was very alarming to us. I think it's very important to state that those red flags were seen by FBI headquarters, and we viewed it as a very, very much a priority matter.
Okay, the memo is the Phoenix memo, which was written by Kem Williams of the Phoenix FBI, and I've interviewed him for my podcast. And he's an important central figure in all of 9/11 pre-intelligence. And he's also hidden behind a partition too. And he's going to talk about the memo itself, which it warns of Islamists training at flight schools in Arizona. And he sent this memo in July of 2001 or June 2001, warning about fundamentalist training at flight schools. And he, nobody acted on the memo, actually.
Did you perceive from that Moussaoui was a significant threat, or because he was in custody, was not a significant threat at that time?
Clearly, he was in custody, no question about that, but we did see this as a priority matter. We realized that we wanted to get into his belongings. We saw the computer and his personal belongings as possibly holding very pertinent information, and we moved in a manner to try to attempt to gain a FISA search warrant.
Let me switch back to the Minneapolis agent. Considering Moussaoui was in custody, what threat do you think he posed?
The staff characterized the focus of the Minneapolis investigation and the FBI investigation as on specific criminal acts. And I take exception to that characterization because our position always was we needed to get into that notebook computer, we needed to get into those individual handwritten notes to determine if there were other co-conspirators that were identified, if there were battle plans, that existed that we didn't know, and if there was other intelligence that could be exploited and linked to other cases that were ongoing both in the Minneapolis office and elsewhere.
Right, and Salmon hit it out the park, because in Mitchell Gray's book, I heard you were going on jihad, which is a fantastic book. It details that Salmon basically assumed that this wasn't just some lone guy who was attacking the United States. He actually said that after he got the information from French authorities that this was going to be a bigger operation, and that's why it was so imperative to get into that laptop.
So we were sensitive to the fact that this could have been a much larger conspiracy. And we were not satisfied that having Mr. Moussaoui in custody dampened the possibility of a terrorist attack.
Let me...
Right, which would be correct, right? Because, you know, you're trying to get as much information from him as possible. And to get that, you need to have the information that's in his laptop, whatever information that may be. It may not be any information at all. But if there's information that could assert Harry Sammet's inclination that this was a bigger operation, they need to get into that laptop as soon as possible.
Go along that line of questioning for a minute. On August 21st of 2001, an agent on your squad sent an email to the supervisory special agent in the radical fundamentalist unit at headquarters saying it is imperative that the USS Secret Service be apprised of this threat potential indicated by the evidence contained in the EC. If he seizes an aircraft flying from Heathrow to New York City, it will have the fuel on board to reach D.C. Do you know why that agent sent the email asking that the Secret Service be notified?
Yes, we discussed it on the squad before he sent the email. And it was our contention initially, and the focus of our investigative hypothesis, that this was a larger issue that was speaking to the potential hijacking or commandeering of an aircraft. There were some pieces of information that were developed during the course of the investigation which led us to believe that that was the ultimate end. And had JFK Airport in New York City been the intended destination from an international flight with an aircraft of the type, a 747-400, there would be enough fuel reserve to hit the nation's capital. And that's what the context was.
I may, if with time allows, return to you for a question, but I want to turn to the Phoenix agent for some questions at this time. And let me start
Ken
with
Williams
this.
now.
In your interview with the Joint Inquiry staff, you mentioned that you did not often see intelligence reports either from FBI headquarters or from other agencies, and that you often felt, and I quote, out on an island, end of quote, from an intelligence perspective in Phoenix. Can you comment on your previous statements, on those statements?
Yes, concerning my feeling of being out on an island, I've noticed I've been doing this work for approximately 13 years, and several years ago there was a significant downsizing of our people at FBI headquarters, to include analysts and supervisors. Several years ago, many years ago, we used to get regular intelligence products put out by the Terrorist Research and Analytical Center, TRAC, I believe the acronym was, that would give us the MOs, if you will, of what different terrorist organizations may be up to in the United States around the country. And it was informative for somebody like myself sitting out in Phoenix what was taking place elsewhere in the country. And I've noticed a decline in that type of product being put out to the field. So my comment relative to being out on an island involved that.
Well, let me go on then for both
Well,
you
okay,
and
now
the,
let me give some background on it. Now, Ken Williams was actually, he had an informant in these Islamic circles because he was a businessman, Henry Allen, and I think his name was Ibrahim something. I could be wrong about his Muslim. He was a Muslim convert. And he actually heard through circles that there was Islamists in flight schools and whatnot. He reported back to Ken Williams. Ken Williams basically went and interviewed somebody by the name of Zacarias Moussaoui. And he went to his house, and in his house, he had pictures of Osama bin Laden on his wall. And he basically was railing against the United States, saying that somebody should attack them in malicious ways. And Ken Williams was like, oh my God, we got to watch this guy. And basically what happened was that Kim Williams was actually reassigned to investigate a serial arsonist that was committing fires in the year 1999, 2000. By the time Kim Williams got back to investigating counterterrorism, Arab fundamentalism, he was playing catch up at this time. And, you know, Phoenix basically has some history regarding radical fundamental issues. In fact, one of the very first offices of the Afghan Services Bureau, the Maktab al-Khidmat, which was a recruiting office for Mujahideen fighters in the Afghan-Soviet War in 1979. Phoenix was one of the very first areas where they had contacts. In New York, they had an actual building, an office near the Al Farouk Mosque in Brooklyn, New York. But one of the oldest links to the Afghan Services Bureau is in Phoenix, Arizona. And Wadi al-Hajj, who was arrested for his role in the 1998 East Africa bombings and was a financial analyst for Osama bin Laden, he basically was charged for conspiring to kill Americans in the 1990s Africa bombings. And he actually was linked to a murder of an Islamic imam in Phoenix because he supposedly gave the gun to somebody who actually shot him. Also, he was also in charge of getting the gun that was used to assassinate the former Jewish defense leader, Rabbi Meir Kahane, who was shot by El Sayed Nosser in Lower Manhattan in 1990. So,
Supervisor, how important do you think it is for agents working counterterrorism to be kept abreast of national and international developments in their program? And was the FBI running counterterrorism as a national level program prior to September 11th, in your opinion? Start with the Phoenix agent.
Yes, I believe my statements, I read that. I believe my statements that it was not being taken important on national level was taken out of context. I believe my management at Phoenix was not looking at it as a national priority due to other priorities that they were looking at, such as the war on drugs. On a national level, I do believe that they took it as a Tier 1 program and a national priority, but I also believe that it's a resource issue. The people at FBI headquarters are working day in, day out very hard, probably putting in some of the longest hours in the Bureau, dealing with threats coming in from all over the world to U.S. interests in the United States and abroad. And I believe they do not have enough people to get these type of intelligence products out to us.
that's clear.
Such
I
as
believe
myself
that.
out in the middle of the desert in Arizona, to know what's going on around the world and within the continental United States.
To the FBI headquarters agent.
Could you repeat the question, sir?
Sure. How important do you think it is for agents working counterterrorism to be kept abreast of national and international developments in their program? And was the FBI running counterterrorism at a national level program prior to 9/11? And having heard the answer of the Phoenix agent, it's not a question of saying something's a priority, but were the necessary personnel and expenditures put into place to make sure it was really a priority?
I can probably answer this question from both a field perspective, having had just gone back to the headquarters about 3 months before 9/11, and also from headquarters. Clearly, counterterrorism needs to be run as a national type program. That does require the resources within FBI headquarters to do that. We need the analysts to be able to pull together this information, to put it into forms that are disseminable to the field, and to get that information out there. Clearly, from a strategic analytical viewpoint, our resources have been lacking, no question about it. I think when you want to look at systemic problems, which I know this committee is looking at, I think clearly you're going to be focused in on strategic analysis, and you're going to be focused in on technology. And to run a national program, you have to have both.
Okay, here's a problem, is that before 9/11, I mean, this is all armchair quarterbacking because every agency in the city nationwide is going to be wanting more money for counterterrorism because now this is the top priority after 9/11. But before 9/11, it wasn't a top priority. And these agents are right in that certain cities really didn't get top priority when it came to counterterrorism, like Phoenix and Ken Williams, like the Minneapolis headquarters in Minneapolis. Yet that there were field soldiers, agents on the field who are getting reports and information, data about fundamentalists operating in certain cities. And these warnings were actually sent in these priority cables. And these cables are sometimes sent to certain field offices, or they sent on a nationwide field office. It depends on the heading where it's going to. But nevertheless, I mean, there was warnings throughout certain cities. For example, New York City, of course, New Jersey was another, Boston was another. That's the Nabil el-Maraba connection to Al-Qaeda. Minneapolis in 2000, 2001, Oklahoma City in 2000, 2001. Chicago, they were running an operation called Operation Vulgar Betrayal. Robert Wright Jr. was investigating Hamas and Hezbollah operations in the country, and he basically was blacklisted by the agency. So yeah, even Arizona to an extent, but not as deep-rooted with it like New York is. So certain agencies would get funding for counterterrorism, funding for domestic crimes, white-collar crimes involving, say, economic crimes, espionage. So there's all, domestic issues such as mass murder or, a serial killer or a spree killer. There's a lot of other crimes that are happening. And what takes priority? Drugs, right? So with Phoenix, as Kimberly stated, it was drugs and not counterterrorism. So, I mean, they would go to their supervisors and they would go to the unit chiefs or their managers and basically say, hey, we need more manpower for counterterrorism, for example. And they'll say, all right, well, what do we need? An agent or two and whatnot. That means man hours, that's 8 hours a day and stuff like, so they all got to tally this up. And it's just like, and then there's bureaucracy involved in all this. And basically, there's that disconnect between, say, the foot guy on the field and the manager who was once a foot guy, or a manager who got springboarded to from the agency without spending very little time in the field. So, and there's that disconnect and distrust between, the guy on the field and the manager, because, with a manager who has field experience, he can actually have a good relationship with the field agents. But if you get a manager who has very little experience with foot agents and foot experience, experience in the streets, there's that disconnect, and basically thinks he knows what's best other than the agent who's actually knowing what's best because he's experienced in that specific field.
Thank you. For the Phoenix agent again, in your interview with Joint Inquiry staff, you stated that you thought the FBI should have separate career tracks for CT and CI agents. Can you elaborate on those thoughts? Counterterrorism, and counterintelligence. Can you elaborate on those thoughts?
Yes, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I believe that there have been competing interests over the years between the criminal side of the house and the counterintelligence, counterterrorism side of the house. Yeah. And I believe that we are always competing with, when I say we, the counterintelligence, counterterrorism side of the house, the criminal side of the house for resources, surveillance resources, support resources, agent resources assigned to work these matters in the field. Prior to 9/11, I've had many examples where I may need surveillance support on a suspected terrorist and would request that support, and that support would be diverted to the southern borders to cover a load of cocaine or marijuana that was coming across the border. So I'm of the belief that we should have separate entities, and we shouldn't be competing with each other within our own house for the resources
Right,
to do
right.
both jobs.
That's what I
if
was
we're gonna
talking
be
about.
continued to be tasked to do both jobs.
Well, for the Phoenix agent and the headquarters supervisor, have things dramatically changed since 9/11 from your perspective?
Oh, yeah.
Phoenix first.
Phoenix first.
I believe that they have, but not to the extent to which I want to see it personally. I believe that we need many more resources directed to the protection of national security. You know, in these hearings that I participated before, in this current one, we keep talking about counterterrorism, which as well we should, but we cannot forget counterintelligence. We cannot forget about the hostile intelligence services that are out there that want to steal our weapons technology, our company's proprietary information, and things of that nature. So we have to be looking at that as well. And with the limited agents that you have employed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, it's tough to do all the criminal things you want us to do and the counterintelligence and counterterrorism responsibilities that you have tasked us to undertake.
And for the supervisor?
Clearly, September 11th was a wake-up call. From a headquarters perspective, I'll speak to the resources have already grown tremendously. We have now the ability to draw on resources within the counterterrorism division that were just not available before September 11th, 2001. For example, we have now an entire group of people looking at nothing but terrorism financing. And that financing can clearly give us leads from an operational standpoint on going after individuals. That resource was never available. We've tremendously beefed up our analytical ranks. That needs to continue. We need to get good, trained people in and keep them. And so from a big picture look, yeah, we're going in the right direction. We have to keep this ship on course. This is too important to walk away from.
For both of you, the Joint Inquiry Staff has been informed that prior to September 11th, 2001, many field offices were not uploading communications to the FBI's automated case system. In addition, the automated case system is allegedly notoriously difficult to search. What effect do these problems have with the automated what effect do the problems of the automated case system have on the FBI's counterterrorism efforts prior to September 11th?
From my perspective, sir, I don't have much faith in the automatic case system. I don't like it. I don't like relying on it myself. As far as documents getting uploaded, the way we work things internally, myself as an agent that would prepare a communication would send it through to supervisory ranks to get approved, and then it would get sent to what we call rotor.
If the system worked correctly, would you have faith in it, and would you use it? I mean, is it something you think should work correctly?
It's something that definitely should work.
Your comment then is based on the fact it's not, you don't think it's working.
I personally do not, and many of my colleagues don't have confidence in the system as well. But in order to address your questions with information being uploaded internally, you know, I prepare a communication. I send it to my supervisory special agent to review. He or she will initial it, and then it will be sent to what we call a rotor, which is a file clerk, who will be responsible for uploading that document into the system. Now, the reason why that's important, and I got to bring this up, is because we are severely understaffed with the support side of the house in the FBI in the field, and a particular rotor could be sitting on a couple hundred documents a day that haven't been uploaded into the system because he or she has just been tasked to do too much. Some of these people get pulled away from their job to perform collateral duties such as answering telephones, escorting visitors into the office, and in the meantime, these documents sit in piles on desks next to computers waiting to get uploaded.
The time is up, but I would like to get the answer, if we could, from the FBI headquarters.
I'd echo those same sentiments. I think people at headquarters find the ACS system to be unfriendly, unreliable. It's just been non-workable. It's led to a lot of problems in terms of the fact that we've not used it within headquarters properly because it can't be counted on. As a result, even though a couple of years ago I believe there was a directive that went out to the field telling them to stop sending hard copies to headquarters because they should be retrieved electronically, it was well known both in the field and at headquarters that you wouldn't get the communication, or there's a good chance you weren't going to get it, or that the headquarters people wouldn't see it. As such, the field would routinely still send hard copy.
And here's the problem, is that the FBI was noted to be like the old agency, unlike the NSA and the CIA, for example, that were getting, millions and millions of dollars for up-to-date technology, up-to-date hardware when it comes to counterintelligence and counterterrorism. The FBI was considered like the old school, and that they didn't get enough funding from the federal government or from the state regarding counterterrorism, counterintelligence. They were considered very stubborn, the agency itself. But going back to the case of Zacarias Moussaoui and the FISA warrant, when Colleen Rowley wrote that letter to Mueller, Mueller actually responded and said that there wasn't enough sufficient evidence for Moussaoui to be approved of a FISA warrant, which turned out to be false. Anyway, another conspiracy involving this story is that when Harry Samet filed out the FISA warrant, it was considered altered, and it was altered by Mike Maltby, the supervisor agent in Minneapolis, Samet's supervisor, and he changed it from a criminal warrant to an information warrant or investigative warrant. And basically, because of that, it was a slower process. And so there was this big argument between the radical fundamentalist unit and Harry Samet and the agency. And so they didn't get the warrant in time, right? And so that's when Colleen Rowley went for the Senate hearings and testified that, yes, there was enough evidence because we have French and German authorities who basically were giving Minneapolis field office information showing a clear link between Zacarias Moussaoui and al-Masri in France and the radical fundamentalist group that they were belonging to. Right there, that's evidence. Should have got the FISA warrant, and they didn't. And so, Harry Samet would later go on to say that if they looked in his laptop, and they probably could have questioned Moussaoui a little bit more vigorously, they said that they probably could have stopped part of 9/11, basically, because Moussaoui, who wasn't tortured, basically acted as his own defense and said that he was selected for a second wave of attacks inside the United States when he was delegated from the first wave. And whether he was telling the truth or not, it just goes to show you that, yeah, when people like myself and DJ Thermal Detonator and Ryan Dawson and Darren Harvey, the only ones who are proving that, yes, there were additional hijackings that were going to happen on September 11th and on September 13th, that wasn't speculation. That was actually evidence compiled from stories that there were people trying to board these planes, with one dressed as a pilot, others who had weapons on them, and one, I think, plane, they found a bomb underneath the seat, box cutters taped to the backs of food trays. There was weapons planted on these planes. CNN reported on this in the days after 9/11. So, yeah, we have evidence to show that there were additional hijackings. What were they? Were they Al-Qaeda? Were they from some other organization? We'll never know, because in the mass sweeps and arrests on September 13th, when I think there was over 55 people detained, they were all deported immediately. So we'll never know who these people were. So see you in the next video.